Kirito and Yujiro make their way into the cathedral. Locating their swords is the first thing on their minds. They stumble across an armory filled to the brim. The church has been hoarding weapons and armor, as if preparing for war. Luckily, that includes the boys' swords. Kirito, however, believes it's just another form of oppression, out of fear of revolt. Upon finding the staircase leading to the top, they are met by an Integrity Knight's torrent of arrows. The duo barely evades the attack and plans their next move. Seeing how his bowstring has broken and his arrows are spent, it should be a piece of cake. That is, until he fires up his bow using its perfect weapon art. The knight accuses the two of corrupting Sir Eldrier's mind with dark arts. Protesting, they explain how they were trying to remind him of his life before becoming an Integrity Knight. But the bowman dismisses the idea. They have no past lives. They descend from the heavens themselves. Kirito tells Yujiro to close in after he blocks the first shot. Despite his best efforts, the arrow smashes through his sacred arts, sending him flying when he tries to use his sword as a last-ditch effort. Now's his chance. Yujiro rushes up the stairs and leaps at the Integrity Knight. Thinking about Alice allows him to unlock the Blue Rose Sword's power. A clash of ice and fire leaves the knight frozen in defeat. The knight marvels at their sword skills, surprised to learn of their unique Aincrad abilities, and is ultimately pleased to know that there are new styles to discover. The knight retracts his accusations and, out of respect, asks for their names. He warns the duo of a deadly ambush on the cathedral's 50th floor before requesting an honorable death by their sword and introducing himself as Deus Albert. Yujiro recognizes him as the same Integrity Knight from the day of Alice's arrest, a day only he remembers. The administrator routinely wipes the knight's memories. Sparing him, the duo continues up the stairs until the sound of laughter stops them. Two young girls block their path. Introducing themselves as Fiesel and Lenal, they descend the stairs towards them. Kirito backs off to let Yujiro take the lead, only leading him right into their trap and dagger. Before Kirito can act, Lenal flanks and shanks. Both boys end up paralyzed by the poison blades. Dragging their limp bodies up the stairs, the girls recount their brutal childhood. It turns out they're apprentice Integrity Knights who were forced to kill each other countless times as subjects in resurrection experiments. Kirito had recognized the girls' dagger scabbards as specific to sheathing poison blades and took precautions against the toxins. The effects were wearing off. When they reach the 50th floor and his captors are distracted by the ambush of knights awaiting them, Kirito launches his belated counterattack, disarming them and using their own poison against them. Telling Yujiro to use his sacred arts as soon as his voice returns, Kirito engages the Integrity Knight, Fanatio. Unable to close the distance, Kirito's stomach and foot are pierced by the knight's perfect weapon art. Apparently, the blade was formed using 1,000 mirrors, allowing it to reflect the sun's energy. After receiving this very crucial information, Kirito uses sacred arts to conjure a mirror, rendering the attack useless. Destroying Fanatio's helmet reveals her attempt to conceal her gender to curb the bias of her opponents, despite the fact that women are the most powerful beings in Underworld. She releases her weapon art, but also hurts herself in the process. Kirito quickly tackles her in a bid to save her from herself, while Yujiro uses his perfect weapon art to freeze Fanatio in place. But it isn't enough to stop her completely. To combat her desperate attempt to stop the duo, Kirito uses his perfect weapon art, rendering them both unconscious after a giant stream of black tendrils reminiscent of the Gigaseeder from which it was forged shoots out of the end of his blade. Yujiro tries to transfer his life energy into Kirito, but Kirito stops him short, telling Yujiro that Fanatio needs their help more than he does. They're all humans after all, even the two kids who were planning to execute them. Kirito tries to use healing arts on Fanatio. It's not enough. He calls out to her allies, to no avail. In a desperate bid to save her life, Kirito uses one of the blades meant for the administrator. The cardinal chastises them, but gives them potions to heal themselves. If they can make it before she awakens, then they may still be able to defeat the administrator without using the cardinal's blade. The two boys open the massive double doors to continue their ascent, only to find a massive elevator. They're surprised when they find a woman there who asks which floor, especially after revealing that they're fugitives. But she doesn't seem to care. This is her only job. She's just simply called the operator, and having spent the last 107 years doing this job, she knows of nothing outside of the shaft. They reach the 80th floor, only to discover an exquisite garden that neither of them expected to find. Yujiro notices Alice and is having a difficult time holding back. Kirito tells him that he'll take care of the fighting while Yujiro waits in the wings with the Cardinal's second blade. But when he charges towards her, she reveals that she's already using her perfect weapon art, the Osmanthus blade. The two clash, and Alice is surprised that Kirito is the second person able to withstand her attacks for more than a few seconds. While she's distracted, Yujiro freezes her, but it's not enough to give them an opening. As soon as she uses her blade to thaw herself, Kirito uses his perfect weapon art, only to cause an explosion, leaving Yujiro alone while the cathedral's walls immediately repair themselves with Alice and Kirito trapped outside. Kirito ends up saving them both by lodging his sword in the side of the giant building. Alice demands he let go of her and allow her to fall to her death, provoking him to chew her out for being so stubborn. He tries to explain how the Axiom Church and the Taboo Index are flawed and the Pontifex is a liar. Kirito's sword comes loose, only for Alice to surprise him by saving his life. They decide to make a truce and climb the tower until they reach an opening. Connected by a chain, they use metal spikes to slowly scale the cathedral. Back at the research facility, Asuna and Dr. Kojiro notice a ship on the horizon, but instead of staying around to protect them, it changes routes, provoking Mr. Nakanishi to make some frantic inquiries. As the sun sets in the underworld, Kirito is having trouble creating more spikes, and as they continue, they suddenly come face to face with gargoyle-esque statues that spring to life. Kirito has to think fast. He launches Alice up onto a ledge. She angrily returns the favor. She explains that they are familiars from the Dark Territories called minions, conjured from clumps of soil. She wants to know the reason for their presence just as much as he does. They make quick work of them. Seeing him fight reminds Alice of her past life, attending the Midsummer Festival, which confuses her. Had she been, or had she just heard about it? She quickly changes the subject, offering a handkerchief to wipe off minion blood, making sure to ask for it back before they continue their duel. Meanwhile, inside, Yujiro enters a giant bathhouse to find an Integrity Knight lounging, who asks him to wait until he gets dressed before they continue. The knight asks whether Fernatio is still alive, and then promises to spare Yujiro since they spared her life. The two square up, and the knight warns him that he has no chance. He's going to use his best move first. Yujiro doesn't stand a chance. The knight's using a blade made out of the system clock, the time-splitting sword, which allows him to strike the future? The Integrity Knight, however, doesn't see his next attack coming. Yujiro throws the blue rose sword into the ceiling while attacking, throwing the knight off guard, and Yujiro tackles him into the water. Using his weapon art to freeze the water with him in it, Yujiro uses Release, which absorbs all the life force of those frozen in its weapon art, banking that his life force is higher than the knight's. Yujiro becomes enraged after the knight recalls killing the dragon in the cave, barely remembering the blue rose sword. He's his hometown's founder and legendary warrior, Berkoli. The Integrity Knight admits to doubting the story of being summoned from heaven. But before any more revelations, the Prime Senator, Chudelkin, rolls in and completely freezes Berkoli and Yujiro. Kirito's spidey senses tingle as he mutters Yujiro's name, still outside on the ledge with Alice. They share a meal, and Kirito lets slip Alice's younger sister's name. Apprehensive, she allows him to continue, promising to end him if she detects him lying. Kirito explains the secret behind Integrity Knights and relays Alice's life before she became one. He goes on to say that the Integrity Knights aren't nearly enough to stop the Dark Territories' armies. They need to defeat the Administrator and train the people to take up arms against their enemies. Alice believes him and asks him to take her to the village before restoring her memories. She stands up and declares that she's renounced her role as an Integrity Knight, only to scream in pain. Her right eye turns red, but she refuses to give in. Kirito holds her as she denounces the administrator and her tyranny, destroying her eye. Yujiro wakes up, realizing he's been dreaming. He comes to in a strange place, unsure of how he got there. On a bed, there's a sleeping woman. The cardinal tries to warn him, screaming for him to run, and the administrator wakes up before he can use the dagger on her. She convinces him that no one truly loves him, not even Alice, and tricks him into reciting the sacred art that she uses on integrity nights. Alice wakes up to find Kirito out of breath and covered in sweat. Apparently, he carried her up to the 95th floor, finally inside the cathedral again. She recoils. How dare he foul her clothing with his sweaty body? To find Yujiro, Kirito uses a sacred art to track the blue rose sword. Alice sees Bercoli, horrified to find him completely frozen, and recognizes the work of the Prime Senator. He thaws just enough to speak and commends her on being strong enough to break the seal in her eye. Kirito finds the blue rose sword under a layer of ice. Alice comments on wielding two swords, to which Kirito replies that fighting with two swords would be crazy. They continue to make their way to the top of the cathedral, only to find a room filled with people trapped in pods, or at least they used to be people. The Pontifex has them trapped, constantly working to monitor the citizens' behavior, finding those who break the taboo index and sending knights to apprehend them. In the next room, they hear Prime Senator Chudelkin freaking out. Alice confronts him about the truth of the Pontifex and integrity knights. The creepy little lout starts singing like a canary. It turns out she was forced into synthesis. Alice stabs him. He laughs. They've fallen into his trap. They run after him, entering a room with a small hole in the ceiling, but he's nowhere to be found. An integrity knight, no, wait, Yujiro, thanks them for returning his sword. He's unable or refuses to remember either Kirito or Alice, and the two square up. Kirito tries to remind Yujiro of who he is while they clash, but despite remembering the names of his moves, he doesn't remember who taught him. Kirito pours his heart into his sword, and using the memories of friendship and angst-ridden screams, he notices the module placed in Yujiro's forehead. For a second, it seems as though he remembers Alice, but uses his perfect weapon art to freeze them in place, much to the Prime Senator's dismay, who goes to finish them off. The administrator congratulates Yujiro on his success and promises his reward after resynthesizing him. But as she does, he remembers Kirito from his childhood and refuses to chant the synthesis ritual. Taking out the cardinal's dagger, he tries to stab the Pontifex, but no blade of metal is able to pierce her skin. She gives him one last chance to commit himself to her and destroy the dagger. But Yujiro comes to his senses and realizes what true love and friendship are. She decides to force synthesis, but Yujiro refuses to give up. Suddenly, the Prime Senator bursts through the floor, followed by Kirito and Alice. They all stop to have a convenient tearful reunion, while the less than scantily clad administrator looks on. Alice speaks out against her tyrannical reign. The administrator reveals that it was she who installed Code 871 to keep her subjects in line. With a newfound vigor, the Prime Senator conjures a giant flame monster he calls Genie, after the administrator promises him a night of rewards for his effort. Alice uses her weapon art to distract the flame genie, while Kirito powers up a shot directed at the senator himself, easily ripping through his unguarded, gross little form. Pretty anticlimactic. But this tips off the administrator to the fact that Kirito is really a human and not a real citizen of the underworld. The administrator activates her trump card, a giant golem made out of divine object-level swords, which she calls the Sword Golem. It instantly skewers Alice and throws Kirito against a wall, all but crushing him. Suddenly, Cardinal speaks through the spider she planted on Kirito's clothing. It grows into a giant and distracts the golem long enough for Yujiro to use the dagger to stab the levitating disc, which conjures a door for the Cardinal to step through. She immediately heals Alice and Kirito. As if nothing happened, Kirito quickly explains who she is to Alice, as Cardinal laments the death of Charlotte, the spider with the very unique and original name. The administrator reveals that she's been stalling to trap Cardinal in the room with her. She also reveals that the golem's power source is converted humans by way of the piety module. She used the memories stolen from the Integrity Knights to distill their desire into each sword, which in turn makes them human, and the Cardinal is powerless to kill humans. She offers her own life in exchange for Alice's, Yu-Gi-Oh's, and Kirito's safety. The administrator brutally tortures her, killing her slowly while cackling. They promise to avenge her, when suddenly Yu-Gi-Oh discovers his purpose and asks Cardinal to transform him into a sword. Before his transformation is complete, he reveals that metal objects don't work on the Pontifex. Yu-Gi-Oh, the sword, makes quick work of the golem, sets his sights on the administrator, and sacrifices himself to sever the Pontifex arm. The sword wasn't made of metal. Just as she turns her own severed arm into a sword to strike Kirito down, Alice jumps between them. Kirito has flashbacks to every other time this has happened, but instead of sitting there helpless, he finally takes up arms. Kirito dons his black swordsman attire and faces off against the Pontifex alone. He's surprised to find that she knows about his multi-strike combos. In fact, there's nothing about the system she doesn't know. Yu-Gi-Oh takes Kirito's hand and pours his remaining energy into a blood-infused blue rose sword. Taking up both swords, he stands against the administrator, who only becomes more enraged with every strike. In an act of angsty friendship, Kirito sacrifices his arm, taking hers in the process, and uses the other to stab her with the blood blade, causing irreparable damage. Instead of attempting to finish him off, she slinks away, promising to meet again next time in his world. But the Prime Senator is somehow still alive, enough to beg her not to leave. He latches onto her, engulfing them in flames, killing them both. Yu-Gi-Oh says a tearful goodbye while Kirito holds him in his arms. Yu-Gi-Oh is reunited with his memory of Alice as a kid. Kirito approaches the system console and hears gunfire in the real world. The ocean turtle is under siege, and Kikuoka tells him to find Alice and take her to the World's End altar within the Dark Territories. Suddenly, his Fluctlight takes damage as the power is cut by the attackers. As he loses consciousness, Asuna descends from the ceiling, reaching out and calling to him. Thank you for sticking until the end. Subscribe for more videos like this.